Chapter 13. I was searching for more ingredients and cupcake inspiration pictures on my computer when Grandma knocked on my bedroom door and peeked inside. "I have to return my book to the library," she said. "Do you want to come and get something?" "Okay, I can look at cookbooks." I grabbed my backpack and threw my journal inside. When we walked into the library 15 minutes later, Grandma said, "I'm going to see what's new in the mystery section. Want me to meet you back here in an hour?" "Sounds good." I gave her a quick wave and walked into the cookbook section, which was on the main floor. I'd stood in front of those shelves so many times before. I pulled a few baking cookbooks down and sat at a table and flipped through them. The recipes all sounded really good. Now I wanted to make peanut butter banana pudding. Ooh, yum. And everything but the kitchen sink cookies filled with crushed up pretzels, chocolate chips, toffee bits, and nuts. But seeing pictures and descriptions of completed recipe wasn't helping me think of new ones. Maybe I needed to walk around the supermarket instead. I carefully put the cookbooks back on the shelf and checked the time on my phone. I still had 45 minutes before I had to meet Grandma. I could start writing a letter back to Marcus since I had my journal with me, but I still didn't know how to respond to his last letter. An idea came to me. My 6th grade social studies teacher once instructed us to use library books to complete one of our projects. We couldn't use the internet at all. It was the first time I'd used only the library to research something. Dad ended up helping me. Growing up, that's how I had to do all of my work. I walked to the information desk. "Excuse me," I asked the librarian, who was staring down at something. When she looked up, I realized she wasn't an actual librarian, or at least she didn't seem old enough to be one. She was white with wavy brown hair, and she wore a gray Smith College t-shirt. Maybe she was still a college student working at the library for the summer. She glanced up at me and then said, "Children's floor is down the stairs to your right." "I know that," I said. "I'm looking for books about crimes." "The children's librarian downstairs can help you with that." "I'm not looking for children's books," I said, a little more forcefully. "I want grown-up books about crimes." For a second, she looked like she was about to question why a middle schooler wanted to look at adult crime books. "Fiction or nonfiction?" Nonfiction," I said. "That's upstairs." She turned to a laminated map of the library on the desk in front of her. "The true crime section is to the right. The criminal law section is behind it." "Thank you." I turned towards the stairs and forced myself not to run all the way up. When I got upstairs, I realized I'd never stepped foot on that floor before. But as a girl had said, the true crime section was to the right. I walked into the stacks, not really knowing what book I was looking for. What I wanted to know was if it was really possible for an innocent person to go to prison. I had no idea if the answer to that was in a book, but there was only one way to find out. People were scattered around nonfiction floor of the library, some looking through books and others sitting at tables reading. It was very quiet, much quieter than the main floor and children's floor. Everyone seemed very serious. Nobody was in the true crime section, which was a relief. I didn't want any adults questioning why I was there. I walked up and down the shelves, staring at book titles until my eyes blurred. There were a bunch of books on serial killers, not at all what I was looking for. I started to worry I wouldn't find what I needed and was about to give up, but finally, at the end of the row, one book's title caught my eye. It was called Wrongfully Convicted. The cover had a grid of square photos, like an online photo album, but each picture showed a different person's face looking at the camera. They were all men, and most of them were black, like Marcus. I slipped it off the shelf and carried it to a nearby empty table. I sat down and cracked open the book, reading through the table of contents. Then I skimmed the introduction, which was written by some lawyer guy. He worked for an organization called the Innocent Project, which he explained helped innocent people get out of prison. Did this mean Marcus could be telling the truth? If the kind of organization existed, then innocent people must go to prison. I couldn't believe it. The rest of the chapters were about different cases, so I turned to the first one and started to read. It described how one man went to prison for armed robbery, but more than one person said they saw him somewhere else, not at the crime scene. He didn't actually commit the crime. Still, in the end, the jury didn't believe his side of the story. He was sentenced to prison for 20 years. He had to leave his family, a wife, and 2 kids. He had an alibi like Marcus, but he still went to prison. I read on. Years later, the man wrote a letter to the Innocent Project, and they agreed to help him. They got DNA evidence from the crime scene tested again, and the results showed it didn't belong to this guy. He really was innocent. The Innocence Project got him out of prison. "Wow," I said out loud before remembering I was in the quietest room ever. I flipped through the rest of the book, where there were at least a dozen other stories like that one, of people who had spent years in prison until the Innocence Project took out on their cases and helped them get out. Now they were all free. There was a page in the book with graphs and numbers to show how many people the Innocence Project helped get out of prison, which was in the hundreds. I couldn't believe that many innocent people were convicted. I stared at another chart that showed the different races of the people the Innocent Project helped. Most of them were black. Of course. I knew about Black Lives Matter movement, how black people all over the country were getting shot by police for no good reason. If those police officers weren't going to jail, then it made sense that the whole prison system was messed up. I never thought about whether prisons had wrong people for it. I assumed that if you committed a crime, you got the punishment you deserved, and innocent people would always be proven innocent. Apparently not. I opened my journal and wrote down the name of the book. I couldn't take it home. I didn't want one more thing to hide from my parents, but I had to be able to look it up again later. Underneath the book's title, I wrote down The Innocence Project. I needed to research them more. I was about to get up to use the computer when somebody sat down at the table across from me. It must have been one of the other grown-ups on the floor, and I kept my head down as I figured out how to explain what I was doing there. But when I looked up, it wasn't a grown-up staring at me. It was Trevor. Ooh, we're starting to get more into Trevor. Chapter 14. What you reading? Trevor asked, smiling. Shh, what are you doing here? I looked past Trevor, but thankfully, he wasn't with either of his parents. I was going to ask you the same thing, he said. Simon dropped me off at the library so I could return my book and get another one. When I walked in, I saw you come up the stairs. I thought it was weird since the kids' books and cookbooks are downstairs. So you followed me? Why did he keep butting his head where it didn't belong? No, Trevor said. I went down to the kids' floor first and got my book. He held up a book he'd chosen, Ghost by Jason Riddles. Oh, that's a good book. And then I came up here to find you. Are you hiding from someone? Who would I be hiding from? I asked as if it was the most ridiculous question ever. I closed the wrongfully convicted, ready to get up and away from Trevor. He shrugged. I don't know. It's weird that you're up here. Then he caught a glimpse of the book on the table. As he stared at it, his face twisted in confusion. I could almost see the wheels in his brain turning. Wait, does this have to do with something with your dad in prison? I stalled. I didn't want to talk to Trevor. I wasn't sure I could trust him. But I was dying to talk about what I just learned, and he did already know about Marcus. Does it? Trevor asked again. Just like that, the story started spilling out of me. I told Trevor about everything between Marcus's first letter arriving on my birthday up until the letter where Marcus said he was innocent. It was like my brain short-circuited and I forgot who I was talking to, that I was still mad at Trevor. I was so caught up in how excited I was to have found information that showed Marcus could be telling the truth. Wow, Trevor looked at me in awe. I can't believe you've been writing to your birth dad in prison, in secret. I looked at him and realized what I'd just done. I shouldn't have told you that. Panic started to balloon in my chest. You can't tell anyone what I said. Promise. Yeah, okay. You didn't promise, I said. I mean it. You can't tell anyone. It's really important. Trevor's face became serious. I promise. And then he looked at me funny. Since when are you a rebel? I'm not, I said, though when I thought about it, it was sort of true. It was so unlike me, lying to my parents, sneaking around doing something they wouldn't approve of. I never lied to them this much about anything, and I felt a little guilty. But now that I knew Marcus might be innocent, there was no way I could stop. Maybe I could track down Marcus's lawyer and ask him questions about the case, or I could find his alibi witnesses and listen to their side of the story. If that person really did see Marcus when the crime was happening, then I would know for sure if he was telling the truth. If I could prove that Marcus didn't commit his crime, then Mom would have to let me have a relationship with him. Then the lying could stop for good. If he's innocent, then how come he's been in prison this whole time? Trevor asked. I hesitated, not sure if I should trust Trevor with anything else. Would he really help keep my secret? What? Trevor asked, as if his thoughts were written all over my face. I'm not going to tell anybody. Okay, I finally said. Marcus said he had an alibi. Like he was somewhere else when the crime happened. Wait, for real? Trevor asked. I nodded and put my hand on the book. Then I found this. It has all these stories about innocent people who went to prison. I didn't think that happened. I guess I knew that, Trevor said. My parents have all these talks with me, like because I'm black, I have to be extra careful around the police, stuff like that. My mom had that talk with me too, I said. I hadn't made the connection. I told Trevor about the Innocence Project and filled him in on the case I read about. I still couldn't believe how unfair it was. What was the point of a legal system if it didn't work a lot of the time? And what about all those people who didn't know to ask the Innocence Projects for help? That's messed up, Trevor said. I know, I said. I'm going to use a computer and see what I can find about Marcus's case. Cool, let's go, Trevor said as he pushed his chair back. What do you mean, let's? I asked. I want to come too, Trevor said. I'm curious now. I hesitated, not sure if I was ready to be friends with Trevor again. But it was nice to talk all of this through with him. It's almost like before. Okay, then, I finally said. I left the wrongfully convicted on the table, gathered my other stuff, and then Trevor and I walked to the nearest computer. My mom never told me any of the details of the crime, only that the victim was someone Marcus knew in college. I didn't want to look it up before because I was sort of scared of what I'd find. But now I wanted to figure it out if he was really innocent. I needed to know exactly what happened the day of the crime. I typed Marcus Johnson into the search bar, and the page filled with links and pictures of some jazz musician. I had to get more specific, so I put Malden after his name since that's where he and my mom grew up. A few articles from over 12 years earlier popped up at the top of the list. In the middle of the page, a few images appeared. I immediately recognized Marcus in one of them. I clicked on it to get a better look. The picture showed his head and the top of his shoulders with a gray background. It had to be Marcus's mugshot. That's him. The only other picture I'd seen of Marcus was him smiling at a basketball game. But in this one, Marcus looked mean, like a murderer would look. His jaw was tight, his eyes stony, as if he didn't feel bad at all. I started to panic. Maybe this was all a mistake. He was guilty. Of course he was guilty. But then I looked at the picture a little closer and noticed something else in his eyes. It seemed like maybe he was putting up a front, like he was really frightened but trying not to show it. I wasn't sure which was right. It looked like the picture came from an article, so I clicked on it. I leaned even closer to the computer screen and started to read. Arrest made in UMass student's murder. Published Friday, November 1st. A suspect had been charged today in the death of 18-year-old Lucy Hernandez, authorities said. The University of Massachusetts freshman was found dead in her apartment near campus on Sunday morning. Marcus Johnson, 18, UMass freshman and Malden resident, is charged with first-degree murder. Hernandez's roommate found her body in her apartment on the morning of October 27th. Authorities ruled the death a homicide later that day, a Sunday. An autopsy determined that the cause of Hernandez's death was blunt force trauma to her head, according to the prosecutor's office. The coroner estimated that her death occurred sometime between 3 and 5 p.m. on October 26. Authorities said Hernandez and Johnson knew each other through school, and classmates believed the two were dating. A witness reported seeing Johnson exit Hernandez's apartment building that afternoon of her death. Suddenly, it was hard to breathe. What happened to Lucy was so horrible, I couldn't read anymore. He sounds guilty, Trevor said. I know, I said, but maybe the witness got it wrong. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe, Trevor said, but he didn't sound too convinced. I went back to the search results and clicked on the next article. The headline read, UMass student murder suspect in court. The article had more pictures. In one, Marcus was wearing an orange jumpsuit with handcuffs holding his hands in front of him, and a police officer walked beside him. It was hard not to see him as a criminal when he was in that jumpsuit. In the photo, his eyes were pointed toward the floor, and his hair dotted his chin and upper lip like he hadn't gotten to shave. This is probably what he looked like right now, only older. Maybe he even had a full mustache and beard now. In a low voice, I read a few lines of the article. Marcus Johnson faced a judge in court today. The 18-year-old is accused of murdering his former classmate, Lucy Hernandez, in October. Lucy's picture was in the article, too. The way she was posed, and with the blue fading background, it looked like a yearbook photo. Her wavy brown hair flowed past her shoulders, and she wore a black sweater, silver dangly earrings, and a silver necklace with a key charm. I wonder who gave her the necklace, and if it meant anything. She looked happy in the picture, probably excited to be graduating from high school. She was alive, and then she wasn't. I swallowed hard, and my stomach churned. You look like you're going to throw up, Trevor said. It's just, that's her, I said. Yeah, she was pretty. I stared at her picture for a few more seconds, memorizing her features. I know. Then I forced myself to go back to the article. It said Marcus pleaded not guilty. There was a picture of Marcus standing next to his lawyer, Anthony Miller. He was white, shorter than Marcus, and had a bald spot on the top of his head. His gray suit and tie made him look like a lawyer, plus the way he stood there with his hands clasped in front of him, all serious and focused on the judge. I glanced at the clock on the bottom right of the computer screen. I have to go back downstairs and meet my grandmother in a minute. Okay, Trevor said. I guess I'll head back to the kids' floor. We got up and went down to the library's main floor. I couldn't believe we were walking together like we were friends again. I won't tell anybody anything, Trevor said. I can help you if you want, with whatever you're doing with Marcus. Maybe. We said goodbye, and Trevor skipped down the steps to the children's floor. I made my way to the circulation desk where I found Grandma holding a couple of mystery novels. She looked up at my empty hands. You didn't find anything to check out? I shook my head. Not this time. When Grandma was done checking out her books, we walked toward the library's entrance. I thought about what the article said. They made Marcus sound guilty, even though he said he was innocent. But Grandma said things aren't as simple as black and white. What if the truth wasn't either?